October 2nd, 1999, 3:27 in the morning. The silence of the Texas mansion is shattered by a single gunshot, a sound so violent, so unexpected, that it tears through the pre-dawn darkness like a scream. In the master bedroom of a $1 million home in Westlake Hills, a man clutches his stomach as his life begins to drain away. "I need an ambulance," Stephen Beard Jr. gasps into the phone, his voice strained with pain and confusion. "Hurry, my guts just came out of my stomach." What unfolds in the hours and years that follow is not a simple tale of crime and punishment. Instead, it becomes a twisted narrative of desire, manipulation, and betrayal. One where the boundaries between victim and perpetrator blur until nobody can quite remember who was hunting whom. This is the story of a man who had everything, a man who lost it all, not to time, not to fate, but to the calculated machinations of those closest to him. This is the story of the Beard Mansion murder, a case that would expose the darkest corners of wealth, obsession, and the human capacity for deception. Stephen Beard Jr. was not a man accustomed to loneliness. A retired broadcasting executive in his 70s, he had spent decades building a life of quiet comfort in Austin, Texas. His mansion stood as a monument to his success, a sprawling estate valued at over $1 million, filled with the kind of luxuries that most people only dream about. First-class travel, designer everything, afternoons spent at an upscale country club, martini in hand, surrounded by people who valued his company primarily for what it cost. But in 1995, something changed. Stephen's wife of 42 years had died just weeks before. For the first time in decades, he found himself truly alone in that massive house. The echoing hallways seemed longer, the silence seemed deeper. At 74 years old, he was beginning to understand that money, for all its power, cannot purchase companionship or touch or the simple human need to be wanted. It was in this state of vulnerability that he walked into an upscale restaurant in Austin and saw her. Celeste Martinez was 32 years old, 40 years his junior. She was working as a waitress, moving between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile carefully calibrated to extract maximum tips from the wealthy patrons who came through the doors. She had dark hair, sharp eyes, and an energy that seemed to fill whatever room she occupied. More importantly, she was interested in him. What followed was not a courtship in any traditional sense. It was a collision. Within weeks, Stephen had asked Celeste to move into his home, along with her 2 teenage daughters, Christina and Jennifer, from a previous marriage. Within months, they were wed. Stephen's children were horrified. "I wasn't happy about the relationship," his daughter Becky would later recall. But Dad was really happy. That happiness, however, would prove to be built on a foundation of sand. So the woman before the crime, Celeste Martinez's life before Stephen Beard Jr. reads like a catalog of trauma and survival. Born in 1963 in California, she had spent her childhood in foster care, a cruel institution that she would describe with visible pain even decades later. She remembered meeting her biological mother once, only to be told, with stunning coldness, "I am not your mother. I was just your incubator." The identity of her real parents remains unknown to this day. Her foster parents, Edwin and Nancy Johnson, were not the nurturing figures a traumatized child needed. Celeste claimed that Edwin sexually abused her throughout her teenage years. She attempted suicide at least once, her young mind unable to process the pain and violation she was experiencing. At 17, she became pregnant. She gave birth to twins, Jennifer and Christina, fathered by a man named Craig Brater, who would become her first husband. Brater, according to Celeste, was abusive. Their marriage was a war zone. When they divorced, Brater took his own life in 1996, leaving Celeste alone with 2 daughters and a lifetime of abandonment trauma. She would marry 2 more times after that, each union ending in failure and disappointment. By 1993, she had drifted to Texas, broken and searching for something, though she couldn't quite articulate what. She took work as a waitress and moved through life with the kind of desperation that only the permanently wounded truly understand. Her daughters, Christina and Jennifer, remembered their childhood with their mother differently than she did. Yes, she had suffered. Yes, she had survived. But in their memories, she was also absent, neglectful, rarely affectionate. When Stephen Beard Jr. appeared in her life with his million-dollar mansion and his checkbook, Celeste saw something her daughters would later recognize with painful clarity: a ticket out. The marriage begins. The early months of Celeste and Stephen's marriage were surprisingly functional. Stephen legally adopted Christina and Jennifer when they turned 17, giving them his name and the security his wealth could provide. Christina, in particular, developed a genuine attachment to her new stepfather. "I really got attached to him," she would say years later. "He was funny. He was kind." Stephen, for his part, seemed genuinely content. His children's reservations faded as they watched their father move through his days with visible satisfaction. He had a wife. He had purpose again. He had someone to share his money with, to spoil, to love. But not everything in the mansion was as it appeared. Just months after the wedding, Stephen's banker informed him of something troubling. Celeste had been systematically removing jewelry and other valuables belonging to his deceased wife from his safety deposit box. She had been stealing from her dead predecessor. Stephen was devastated. He consulted with lawyers about filing for divorce. A friend remembered him saying Celeste couldn't have been stealing from him. He was really sad about it, but then something shifted. Celeste, when confronted, managed to talk her way back into his good graces. Stephen withdrew the divorce petition. The marriage continued. It was a pattern that would repeat itself over the coming years. Transgression, confrontation, reconciliation. Each time, Celeste would somehow convince Stephen to stay, to forgive, to believe that their love was worth whatever trouble it caused. The unraveling. For years, Celeste lived as she had always dreamed. She bought herself luxury vehicles. She purchased lavish jewelry and designer clothing. On shopping expeditions, she would spend between $15,000 and $30,000 in a single afternoon. She traveled first class. She threw elaborate parties. She lived like the wife of a wealthy man should live, at least according to the narrative she had written for herself. But cracks were forming in the facade. In 1999, Celeste admitted herself to a psychiatric hospital in Austin. She was experiencing suicidal ideation, a symptom she claimed of severe depression brought on by her husband's controlling behavior. "Our house was a complete war zone," she told psychiatrists. "Stephen wanted me to have nothing to do with the kids as far as disciplining them. I felt like I was going to be totally alone in this big house. As he passed out every night, it was just too much. I was so upset about everything. I was so depressed. I just wanted to kill myself." During her psychiatric stay, Celeste met someone who would alter the trajectory of her life: Tracy Talton, a 40-something bookstore manager and fellow patient. Talton had her own demons. She struggled with alcohol addiction. She had been raised in an abusive household. In many ways, she and Celeste were mirrors of each other, two wounded women looking for a way to stop bleeding. What developed between them in that psychiatric facility was, by all accounts, more than friendship. The relationship, the exact nature of Celeste and Tracy. Talton's relationship remains one of the most contested elements of this case. Prosecutors and witnesses would later testify that the two women were lovers, that they shared a romantic and physical connection that went far beyond what friendship could encompass. Celeste's lawyer, on the other hand, would argue that Talton was obsessed with Celeste, that she had constructed an entire fantasy in her mind, and that Celeste merely pitied her and wished to be kind. The evidence suggests something closer to the truth lies somewhere between these extremes. When both women were released from the psychiatric facility in the summer of 1999, they maintained contact. Celeste even threw Talton a party at the mansion, a gesture that seemed oddly intimate for two women who were supposedly just friends. Jennifer Beard, Celeste's daughter, observed the relationship with growing discomfort. It was pretty obvious that Talton had feelings for Celeste. She would later state. Friends and family members described witnessing moments that seemed to cross the boundary between platonic affection and something more. Celeste sitting on Talton's lap, Talton whispering in Celeste's ear. The two of them close enough to touch, intimate in a way that went beyond what conventional friendship typically allowed. On one occasion, Christina caught her mother and Talton kissing in Celeste's bed. When Christina told her father what she had witnessed, Celeste denied everything. She maintained that nothing inappropriate had ever happened between her and Talton, that any physical contact was merely the result of misunderstanding or misinterpretation. Stephen, however, had his suspicions. He banned Talton from the house. For someone as obsessed with Celeste as Talton appeared to be, this must have felt like a devastating rejection. Cut off from the woman she loved, forced to watch from a distance as Celeste continued to live in luxury with a man she didn't truly care about, Talton spiraled. What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy multiple lives and expose the depths of human manipulation and desperation. The shooting, October 2nd, 1999, 3:27 a.m. The mansion was dark and quiet. Stephen lay in his bed in the master bedroom, his CPAP machine humming softly as he slept. Celeste was in another part of the house, in her own bedroom, away from the noise that her husband's medical device produced. What happened next is where the story becomes murky. A fog of disputed facts, contradictory testimony, and the kind of psychological manipulation that makes it difficult to know where truth ends and deception begins. Stephen woke to pain. Explosive, tearing, all-consuming pain that radiated from his abdomen. Someone had shot him with a 20-gauge shotgun. The wound was catastrophic. His intestines were literally protruding from his body. "I need an ambulance," he gasped into the phone. "Hurry! My guts just came out of my stomach." Emergency responders arrived within minutes. They found a 74-year-old man in critical condition, clutching at his body in shock and agony. Initially, they speculated that his injury might be related to a recent surgery he had undergone. This theory was quickly dispelled. Someone had shot him. Celeste appeared shortly after the paramedics arrived, seemingly surprised by the scene unfolding in her home. She claimed to have been asleep in her separate bedroom and to have heard nothing. She went with her husband to the hospital. At the mansion, investigators began collecting evidence. Near Stephen's bed, they found a shotgun shell, 20 gauge. This piece of physical evidence would prove crucial in the days and weeks to come. The investigation turns. Police initially had few leads. Who would want to harm Stephen Beard Jr., a man in his 70s who, by all accounts, was beloved by those who knew him, a man with no obvious enemies, a man whose wealth was secured, but not so vast as to inspire murder among competitors or business rivals. But when investigators turned their attention to Celeste, they encountered something unexpected, a wall of legal representation. Celeste immediately hired a defense attorney. She refused to allow law enforcement to speak with her or her husband. She had learned early in her traumatic life that vulnerability could be weaponized against you, and she was not about to make that mistake now. But her daughters were under no such constraint. Christina and Jennifer, when questioned, pointed investigators in a very specific direction, toward Tracy Talton. They described the relationship between their mother and Talton. They spoke of the jealousy that had driven Stephen to ban Talton from the house. They described their mother's behavior in the months since the ban. Her anger, her frustration, her obsessive discussions about Talton and how unfairly she was being treated. Police began to investigate Talton. What they found was chilling. When they approached Talton at her home to question her about the shooting, they discovered what detectives described as a shrine to Celeste. Dozens of photographs of Celeste covering the walls. The obsession was not hidden or subtle. It was displayed openly, almost proudly, as if Talton wanted the world to know the intensity of her devotion. When questioned about her firearms, Talton handed over a 20-gauge shotgun. Ballistics testing would later confirm that this was the weapon used to shoot Stephen Beard Jr. The confession. Confronted with the physical evidence, Tracy Talton admitted that she had fired the shot that wounded Stephen Beard Jr., but when pressed for her motivation, asked why she had done it, she refused to speak further. She clammed up entirely, invoking her right to remain silent and requesting legal representation. For months, she maintained her silence. Stephen, meanwhile, was in recovery. Doctors had performed emergency surgery. His wounds were severe, but he had survived the initial trauma. He was transferred to a recovery facility to begin the long process of healing. But healing would not come. Just one day after his discharge from the hospital, Stephen was readmitted. Hospital staff discovered that his wounds had become infected, a serious complication that suggested either improper wound care or, as some would later speculate, deliberate sabotage. On January 22, 2000, Stephen Beard Jr. died from complications related to the gunshot wound and the subsequent infection. The charges against Tracy Tolton were upgraded from attempted murder to murder. The widow's strange behavior. In the days following Stephen's death, Celeste's behavior raised serious red flags among investigators and family members alike. A widow, by social convention and expectation, should grieve. She should appear sad, devastated, hollowed out by loss. But Celeste seemed almost relieved. Jennifer noticed it immediately. The way she acted wouldn't be the way a widow would act. I just remember her laughing a lot, kind of in a way that she was relieved that he wasn't around anymore. A police sergeant who responded to the shooting recalled something Celeste had said that struck him as profoundly odd. In the chaos of the immediate aftermath, as her husband lay bleeding and paramedics rushed through their home, Celeste had mentioned, almost casually, "This is perfect timing. We were supposed to go to Europe tomorrow." Europe. Not Stephen's survival, not his recovery. Europe. When friends expressed sympathy for her loss, Celeste told them she was feeling too much grief and needed to check into a clinic for treatment. But instead of checking into any clinic, she traveled to New Orleans, where she proceeded to party, drinking, dancing, carrying on as if her husband of 4 years had never existed. 5 months after Stephen's death, Celeste married again, this time to a carpenter named Cole Johnson. This was her 5th marriage. Christina watched this unfold with a mixture of horror and sadness. She didn't seem upset. The turning point. For months after Stephen's death, Tracy Tolton remained silent about her motivations. But something changed when she learned that Celeste had married again. The news seemed to shatter whatever resolve had been keeping Tolton quiet. She realized in that moment that whatever she had believed existed between herself and Celeste had been an illusion. She had shot a man, taken a life, potentially thrown away her own freedom, all for someone who had moved on to a new husband within half a year. Heartbroken and angry, Tolton finally opened up to investigators. She told police that Celeste had convinced her to shoot Stephen. She claimed that Celeste had told her Stephen was abusive, that his treatment of her was so awful that she was contemplating suicide. Tolton said she had shot him out of a misguided sense of protection, a twisted act of love motivated by Celeste's false claims of abuse. But Tolton also revealed something even more damning. She alleged that after the shooting, after Stephen had survived and was in recovery, Celeste had deliberately infected his wounds so that he would die, that the infection that ultimately killed him was not a random complication, but the result of calculated sabotage. Travis County. Sheriff Margot Fraser, however, was skeptical of Tolton's narrative. We spoke to a lot of people who knew them, and there was no indication that Stephen Beard was ever physically or mentally abusive towards Celeste or the twins. The evidence suggested that Tolton was either delusional about the nature of her relationship with Celeste, or she was lying to minimize her own culpability. The arrest and trial. Celeste was indicted for murder in March 2002. She entered a plea of not guilty and maintained her innocence with a consistency that seemed almost robotic. She denied having an affair with Tolton. She claimed the bookstore manager was deluded and had invented the entire scenario. She accused Tolton of sexual assault, citing instances where Tolton had attempted to kiss her when she was vulnerable or unconscious. Several witnesses corroborated parts of this account. Indeed, Tolton had attempted to kiss Celeste on at least one occasion, during Jennifer's high school graduation in 1999, when Celeste was apparently passed out. But the prosecution had something Celeste's defense could not overcome: the testimony of her own daughters. Christina and Jennifer took the stand and corroborated what numerous witnesses had claimed. They had seen their mother and Tracy Tolton kissing willingly, consensually, on more than one occasion. The relationship had been real. It had been mutual. It had been romantic. When confronted with this testimony, Celeste's response was bitter and cutting. "It makes me sick. You always hear blood is thicker than water. Not in my case." The defense, meanwhile, attempted to paint Christina and Jennifer as mercenary traitors. They suggested that the daughters were testifying against their mother not out of a sense of justice, but out of greed, that they wanted access to Stephen's massive wealth and were willing to sacrifice their relationship with their mother to obtain it. When asked questions by the defense, Christina responded, "I do not remember," 298 times, a strategy that frustrated the judge and jury, but ultimately protected her from further cross-examination. Celeste, for her part, claimed that her daughters had been poisoned against her. When they found out that they weren't going to get any money till I died or went to prison, that's when they turned against me. My kids sold me to the state of Texas, but the daughters also testified to things they had heard their mothers say, casual comments that revealed her true feelings about the man she had married. Why doesn't he just die already? I married Stephen for his money. He disgusts me. Christina claimed that on at least one occasion, she had witnessed her mother break apart a sleeping pill and place it in Stephen's baked potato. She suspected that Celeste had been drugging her husband so that she could slip away to be with Tolton. The conviction. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On their verdict, they found Celeste guilty of capital murder. The sentence was life in prison, without the possibility of parole for decades. Celeste was devastated by the verdict. To this day, she maintains her innocence. It's not right that I'm spending the rest of my life in prison and there is no evidence against me. I just wish somebody could come forward and help me. But there was evidence. Damning evidence. One of the most crucial pieces was a tape-recorded conversation between Celeste and Christina. Christina had made the decision to record their phone calls after her mother had been particularly abusive and lashing out with psychological cruelty. She was saying horrible, horrible stuff, Christina recalled. So I just started taping our conversations when they would get out of hand. In the tapes, Celeste can be heard yelling at her children, crying hysterically and, most damningly, discussing a plot to hire someone to kill Tracy Tolton so that she couldn't testify against her. This recorded conversation proved that Celeste was not a passive victim of circumstances. She was not a woman who had been manipulated by an obsessed stalker. She was someone actively working to silence witnesses and obstruct justice. The aftermath. Tracy Tolton received a sentence of 20 years in exchange for her full cooperation with the prosecution. She was paroled in 2011 and has since quietly faded from public view. Celeste remains imprisoned at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Lane Murray Unit in Gatesville. She will be eligible for parole in 2042 when she is 80 years old. Jennifer Beard noted that the trial was the last time she saw her mother in person. The relationship, whatever it had been, was severed completely. The Beard Mansion murder is not a simple story of crime and punishment. It is a complex narrative about trauma, manipulation, obsession, and the ways that wealth can both enable and obscure the worst aspects of human nature. Was Tracy Tolton a deluded stalker who imagined a romantic relationship that didn't truly exist? Or was she a woman who fell genuinely in love with someone and was manipulated into committing murder? Was Celeste a victim of circumstance, a woman traumatized by childhood abuse, seeking refuge in wealth and stability? Or was she a calculating manipulator who saw in Tolton's obsession an opportunity to eliminate a husband who had become an obstacle to her own desires? The truth, perhaps, is that they were both victims and perpetrators, caught in a psychological web of their own making. What is certain is this: a man is dead. His death came at the intersection of obsession, greed, and the human capacity for self-deception. His widow claims innocence from a prison cell. His daughters have had to reconcile the fact that the woman who gave them life may have orchestrated the murder of a man who tried to be a father to them. The Beard Mansion stands empty now, a monument to the dangers of marrying for money, the perils of obsessive love, and the terrible price that can be paid when wealth and trauma collide. This is a story without heroes, only victims, perpetrators, and the deep, complicated lines that separate them.